So this is a piece of a live edge burl. I currently have it mounted with one corner pressed into the taper and the live edge facing towards the tailstock with some tailstock support. I'm just going to round it out so that I can get it into a mold so that I can cast it. Alright, so that's round enough to fit inside my mold. The next thing I need to do is I don't need all this narrow mass down here, so I'm probably just going to grab a parting tool and just part that part off of it. Alright, so I'll just use a handsaw to finish off that cut. Alright, so it's all rounded and it fits nice and snug in my plastic container, so I'm all good for that. My next step is I want to put this in a oven for a little bit to dry it out, because I'm going to be casting this in aluminite clear slow, and that will foam up if there's any moisture left in the wood. So now that I have the wood all dried, it's time to get everything prepared to go into the mold. So I have this little dragon hatchling. I made it on a 3D printer and then I custom painted it with an airbrush and some regular brushes. I am going to attach it to the piece of burl with a little bit of CA glue just to hold it in place. As I go right about there. Maybe position a little better than that. And add a little bit more just to be a little more structurally sound so it doesn't release. So now that I have that all attached, it's time to place this into the mold. So here's my container. I don't want this to lift up while the resin is curing, so I was going to put a little bit of hot glue on the bottom of it. Drop it down and press it in, let that glue cool down so it sticks, and that will hold the piece of wood in there and not let it float. So next I want to build this mold up a little bit higher, so I have another matching container that I just cut a rim off of, and I'm going to use some aluminum foil tape to make my link between the two. You can find this tape in the HVAC aisle of any hardware store. It's made for sealing ductwork, so it can handle the temperatures of the resin curing without releasing and without leaking. You just want to make sure that you use enough of it. Alright, so that should be enough tape. The next thing I want to do is get my resin all mixed up. Alright, so I'm going to be using Alumilite Clear Slow for this. It's mixed by weight, not by volume. So I have my scale that I have set for grams. I probably want to mix a full container of this, because that's about the volume that I'll need to fill that whole thing up. Alright, so now that I have it all, both parts in, I just got to give it a good mixing. Alright, so now that it's all mixed up, I just need to add the resin to my mold. Move it around a little because I guess there's a little air pocket underneath the burl that's letting some air up right now. But I got a little bit of time before I need to get this into the pressure pot. So I left it in the pressure pot overnight, and now it's time to demold it. Okay, so it came out pretty clear. You can see the dragon hatchling inside. So next step is to get this on the lathe and get turning it. Alright, so now that I have it mounted in my chuck, I'm going to start to shape the egg. I'm going to actually be doing using a camera with an overlay so that I get the shape just right. Alright, so that's it for shaping for now. I'm going to get most of this sanded down, and then I'm going to flip this into a vacuum chuck so that I can finish off the bottom. Alright, so I have it all sanded down. Now I just need to get this out of the chuck and put my vacuum chuck on so that I can turn it around and finish off the little bit on the bottom. So all I have left to do on the lathe is just to clean up this bottom, get rid of the tenon, and round the whole thing over so it looks cohesive. So I have this mounted in my vacuum chuck. I'm going to turn my vacuum chuck on. It's going to be a little noisy. And I'm going to turn as much as I can with the tailstock support, and then just back the tailstock out for the last little bit. Alright, so a little bit of sanding and then it will be all done. Alright, so the very last thing before I put some finish on the raw wood that's left on the bottom of this is just to give it a quick buff with some Blue Rouge. Now I'm just going to buff the resin part of it. This will help remove any of the remaining haze that's on the resin from sanding it. Alright, so now that I did it with the buff wheel, I'm going to switch it over to just a plain soft cotton wheel, just to remove any residual Blue Rouge off of the resin. So you can see that after I buffed it, it took away all the haze and it made the resin perfectly clear. Buffing with the Blue Rouge is an important step when you're turning something like this to take it to the next level. So all I got left to do now is just to apply a little bit of oil to the burl wood. Alright, so the last thing I'm going to do is apply a couple coats of a linseed oil to this. It doesn't take much. So I'll apply a heavy liberal coat, let it soak in for a little bit. A little bit more than that. And then come back and wipe it off. The oil is not really going to affect the resin, so I don't have to worry about getting it on on the resin itself. You see how the oil is bringing the burl grain out. So just wipe the first coat off, let that soak in for a little bit, and then I'll come back and I'll apply a second coat. And then it will be all done.